I just got back from an 8-day cruise on Royal Caribbean's Oasis of the Seas to the Eastern Caribbean, and I'm here to tell you what I thought. I picked this cruise because I was taking vacation with my 17-year-old daughter. She hadn't been on a cruise in 7 years, and I thought Royal Caribbean would be a good cruise line for her, with lots of older teen activities that I knew she would enjoy, like rock climbing, ice skating, and the various shows. The itinerary also had one of her favorite places, Puerto Rico, on it. However, a few months before the cruise, Puerto Rico was canceled and replaced with St. Thomas. They were repairing the dock they use for bigger ships in Puerto Rico after a dock accident last year. I've heard that the Puerto Rico dock has since been fixed, so this itinerary change shouldn't be occurring for future sailings. We were told with plenty of notice. I did discuss the change with my daughter, and she was good with proceeding, even though we weren't stopping in Puerto Rico. Embarkation in Port Everglades, which is in Fort Lauderdale, was crazy fast. We took the hotel shuttle there. They didn't even check our boarding pass first. They ushered us straight to security. Since we each just had a backpack after leaving our suitcases with a porter, security went fast. Then we immediately went to a woman holding an iPad. She processed our passports and boarding passes. I thought she was going to be the first person of many, but imagine my surprise when she said we could proceed up the escalator and board the ship. I think waiting for security, going through security, and being processed by that woman took 5 to 7 minutes total, and then we were on board. This is my new record for getting on a cruise ship. Back in November, I got on a Princess ship in 15 minutes, which I thought was super fast. So now that we're on the ship, my first thoughts after boarding Oasis is that it's clear it's a well-maintained ship. This is the first ship in the Oasis class of ships, and it was built in 2009. I am used to newer ships, so I was initially apprehensive about being on a ship that had been in service for 16 years. And then there was some indication that there has been some mechanical issues that I'll talk about later. But my initial impression was that she was extremely well cared for. Central Park felt brand new. Throughout the cruise, the crew was varnishing all the handrails on the jogging track. The Royal Promenade was stunning. The only thing that felt a bit dated to me was the decor and carpet in the stairwells. It wasn't that it was in poor shape, but more felt that it was very 2009. I've been on about 10 cruises so far, and this is the first inside cabin that I've been in. I've booked inside cabins quite a few times, and usually I bid to upgrade, or the price on the cruise drops and I get an upgrade to a balcony when I call customer service. I was doubly apprehensive about this inside cabin because I've never been in an inside cabin, and I was also worried that it would feel very dated. The inside cabin was very good. I had requested separate beds when I booked, and then I was sent a form for request by Royal Caribbean a few days before sailing, where I also requested separate beds, but we were given the beds put together. I'm not sure why they ask so many times and don't fulfill what you request. My daughter stood in line at guest services to have them take apart. She stood there in line about an hour just because she said she wanted something to do. And within a few hours, our cabin steward did that. The cabin was in pretty good condition, and the bathroom felt roomier than most cruise ship bathrooms I've been in recently. I really like the shower door. I'm thinking the shape of the shower made the bathroom feel a little more spacious. Worth noting is that there was one unsightly neon stain on the carpet. I was a bit annoyed that there were only 3 outlets right next to each other at the desk. No USBs and nothing next to the bed that I saw. The 3 outlets are so close to each other that we found only 2 of them to be usable. If you're in an inside cabin, I really recommend this type of nightlight. I got it at the Dollar Tree, and I use these at home for the hallways and our guest bedrooms. These give off the perfect amount of light to navigate the cabin with the other lights out. All of the lights in the cabin are too bright to sleep with on, except for this nightlight. One other option is to leave the bathroom light on and crack the door, but I found that the door would sometimes make noise when it was cracked. So I'm so happy that I brought this little nightlight. I've heard others recommending a light that mimics the sun coming up. I'm usually fine waking up on my own or with an alarm, so I didn't need that type of light, and this is very easy to travel with. The cabin was on the coolest setting when we arrived, and we left it there and thought the temperature was nice and comfortable the whole time. I didn't feel claustrophobic at all in an inside cabin, and it was enough space for us. I liked that the couch and desk were in the middle of the room because it gave us more space. The room next to us had the bed right next to the bathroom, and I didn't think that that setup maximized the cabin space like our setup did. I found that I slept better in this inside cabin than I have in balcony cabins, and I will definitely do an inside cabin again. I just need to remember to bring my trusty nightlight. The cabin steward made my daughter a plethora of small towel animals over the cruise, and by the end, we had a little menagerie. Royal Caribbean does once a day cabin steward service, and you can request early or late cabin service. After we boarded, we also had to sort out our dining. Every time I've been on Royal Caribbean, which has been 3 times now, I've requested early traditional dining as early as possible at 5 p.m. And I've been given my time dining instead, every time. This isn't a huge thing, but it does require going to the main dining room on the first day, a few hours before dinner, and requesting your dining to be changed. Like always, they were pleasant and did this. I just wish they would fulfill my original dining and bed setup requests. Oasis of the Seas has a lot of ship features, and my daughter and I explored as many of these as we could during the 8-day cruise. We are both big fans of Central Park. It tends to be a quiet part of the ship with lots of natural greenery. It's a wonderful place to sit outside in either the shade or the sun, away from the fast pace of the rest of the ship. Many of the specialty restaurants open to Central Park. There's also a lending library, which surprisingly has very few books in English, but is also a nice quiet place to sit. Central Park also has its own bar, and you can also get on or off the Rising Tide bar, which rises from the Royal Promenade to Central Park, from deck 5 to deck 8. At night, you can take in some orchestral music or just enjoy the fairy lights and scenery. One hack that I recommend is, even if you don't dine in the specialty restaurant, 150 Central Park, go in and ask for an order of their bread. It's a wonderful garlic bread that's a lovely treat. The upper sports deck tends to be very busy on sea days. Portside Barbecue is a specialty restaurant, but is relatively affordable, and behind it is the 9-hole miniature golf course. This is a fun course as it has obstacles and those fun extras that make mini golf really enjoyable for the youngsters. Because I'm not a fan of the direct sun, we did this after the sun went down. Also, you will find the sports court where you can play pickleball or basketball. The zip line is also here. And of course, the main attraction, the flow riders. The flow riders are where you can boogie board and surf, and they're immensely popular and always seem to have a long line, especially on the first few days of the cruise. You can also take the ultimate abyss. That's the dry slide that corkscrews down 10 decks from deck 16 to deck 6. On the starboard side, you will also find the complimentary restaurant El Loco Fresh. This has some pretty good Mexican food like quesadillas and burritos, and make your own tacos. On deck 15 forward, you will find the solarium. This is an adults only area. At each of the entrances on both the starboard and port side, you will find 24-hour infinity whirlpools. I like these, but they weren't as hot as actual hot tubs. On Oasis of the Seas, unlike the other Royal Caribbean ships I've been on, like Wonder of the Seas and Ovation of the Seas, the solarium has quite a bit of space that is open air and not glass. This means that the solarium cannot be climate controlled, and it is often hot in the Caribbean. Think how hot a greenhouse can get, especially when the ship is in port. When the ship is moving, there's a bit more airflow, but I still found it uncomfortably hot. What this means is that I didn't want to linger there, and I definitely didn't want to lay down on a lounger. The only place you see people in the solarium is pretty much the pool and hot tubs. Otherwise, it was pretty sparse. I'm glad that future ships got a climate-controlled solarium, and I do wish they would have fixed this in a dry dock, although I imagine it's something that can't be easily fixed. I had been looking forward to spending time in the adults-only solarium, and unfortunately, it didn't pan out because it was too hot during the day. A big hit, however, is the Solarium Bistro. This is a smaller version of the Windjammer Buffet, and it's a lot less busy than the buffet, and it's open for breakfast and lunch. You can also come to the Solarium Bistro for a Mediterranean buffet dinner. We did come here for breakfast a couple times, lunch once, and I did pop in here for some baklava after dinner one night. The boardwalk is another main area of the ship on the back of deck 6. This is where you'll find the carousel, Playmaker Sports Bar, the hot dog stand, the candy store Sugar Beach, Johnny Rockets, the rock climbing wall, and the Aqua Theater, where you can see the Aqua 80 show. Sometimes during the day, they'll show movies on the screens back here, and honestly, people didn't gravitate toward the movies out here. I think other ships do it better when they play movies on the pool deck. There are also some family games, like archery, that you can play here. The boardwalk has a Coney Island vibe, and I really enjoyed it. If you get the refreshment package, Johnny Rockets has great milkshakes. Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, and Oreo. While it does have an upcharge for lunch and dinner, Johnny Rockets has a complimentary breakfast that I encourage you to try out at least one day on your cruise. My daughter climbed to the top of the rock climbing wall and really enjoyed it. I think Royal Caribbean is the best cruise line to get you to wash your hands before going into the buffet. They have plenty of sinks where you can wash your hands, and they have someone there to remind you with washy-washy. The buffet on Oasis of the Seas is set up with different island stations. It's busy when it's open, and if it starts to get less busy, they close one side, but it's not too difficult to find a seat. The Royal Promenade is like an inside mall, and this is where you can find Sorrento's, the pizza place, the pub, the 24-hour cafe, shops, the Bionic Bar, and guest services. The Royal Promenade is also where they have the theme parties and balloon drop. We enjoyed making custom drinks at the Bionic Bar, although our future as mixologists is likely not very bright, as we didn't really make the best drinks, but it was still a fun experience. We were on the ship for 4th of July. Some people really got into their 4th of July attire. The ship had a custom 4th of July menu for dinner, and the servers were given props for the evening. I'm not one to usually go to the theme party nights, but we did get a nice quiet spot overlooking the chaos on the Royal Promenade. Royal Caribbean loves a balloon drop, and they had a red, white, and blue balloon drop for the occasion. The passengers really seemed to enjoy it. For the walkers and joggers, there's a great track that goes all the way around Deck 5. They do close the aft portion during the aqua performances in the evening and rehearsals in the late morning, which creates a bit of a traffic jam with people going both ways when it's supposed to be one way. One of my favorite places is the Vitality Cafe. I did have a refreshment package on this cruise, which meant I could get fresh squeezed juices and smoothies at this cafe. It felt like it was an undiscovered gem for the first couple of days. And then it was discovered and the lines became insane, like 20 minutes to get a juice. I found that the lines were shorter in the afternoon, so I'd go there then. Also, they serve Starbucks coffee here, but aren't an official Starbucks, so your drink package works here. There is an official Starbucks in the Royal Promenade, so that one does not take the drink package. I went with my daughter during the summer. I expected a lot of kids, as that's what you get when you cruise during the summer. I didn't see a ton of little kids, but there were a lot of tweens and teens. For the most part, they were behaved, but sometimes they traveled in very large packs of 10 or more. As you might expect, their behavior isn't as good when in very large groups. My teen isn't one to hang out at the teen club, but I did force her a couple times, and she said there was a huge line before the teen club opened. So if you have a social teen, there are plenty of opportunities available at the teen club. There were 3 silent discos offered during the 8-day cruise. What I like is they offered each of these at different venues: the Solarium, the Comedy Club, and the Boardwalk. The Solarium was the largest space, and I thought that this was the best place for a silent disco. The Comedy Club was pretty small for how popular the silent disco was. And the Boardwalk silent disco did congest the Boardwalk quite a bit. I also noticed that the silent disco playlist was very similar on each night. Entertainment was pretty good for this 8-day cruise. I like that there are different types of shows. On most cruise lines, you get a cast that mainly sings and dances. But on Oasis of the Seas, there are separate casts with different talents, and then they bring in some performers for custom shows. Unique to Royal is the Aqua Show. This is an incredible show in the Aqua Theater that features dancing, diving, and aerial artistry. On Oasis, the theme of the show is the 1980s, and it's called Aqua 80. Get ready to see hoverboards and listen to some Huey Lewis and Prince. I sat in the splash zone, which is in the first 3 rows. The dancers soak you by throwing water on you, but they do give you towels if you choose to sit here. The big production show in the Royal Theater is Cats. Be aware that this is a long show, a little over 90 minutes. It was our first time seeing cats, and while the performers are talented and the costumes are elaborate, it's a unique show that has a considerable amount of people walking out during it. The same cast of Cats also does a show early in the cruise called One Sky. It's more of your traditional cruise performance with singing and dancing, and this is against the backdrop of early aviation. For the cruise I was on, they also brought in the Las Vegas tenors that performed 2 nights with some overlap of material, but not completely identical. They were great performers and also had a lot of 1980s in their repertoire. This ship also has a cast of ice skaters, and they put on a Hans Christian Andersen performance. The costumes were extremely elaborate, and it was a very entertaining show. Passenger ice skating was also offered in this venue on multiple days. My daughter took advantage of that twice. Do know that you have to have long pants, socks, and wear a helmet. It seemed like it got more crowded later in the cruise, so you might want to get on it the first and second day before more people find it. The ice skating venue was a great place to sit in a cool climate on a hot day and watch people ice skate. Laser tag was also in this venue. I learned that I'm completely awful at laser tag. The 5-year-old doubled my score. In the evenings on some nights, they had some of the more popular game shows like Crazy Quest and Battle of the Sexes here. They would also have trivia and game shows in smaller venues around the ship, like at Spotlight Karaoke and Boleros in the Royal Promenade. I felt like these activities, like trivia, were very popular and needed a venue larger than they were given, as it would be standing room only 15 minutes before it started. I love seeing comedy shows on cruise ships, and for this cruise, they brought in 2 comedians. I believe there were 14 comedy shows throughout the cruise, and each show was 45 to 50 minutes, and the comedians would split the time at 20 to 25 minutes each. Most of these shows were at Blaze, which is the comedy club that's near the ice skating rink. The last comedy show was at the Royal Theatre. It was a 3 bears situation where Blaze was too small of a venue and the Royal Theatre was too large of a venue. I ended up going to 3 of the comedy shows. The first comedian was awesome, and he did not repeat any material in the 3 shows that I saw. They were 3 unique shows. But the second comedian repeated himself quite a bit. Some of his material I heard 3 times. My general feedback for Royal is to swap out the 2 comedians for 2 new comedians in the middle of the cruise, or at least to do some quality control on the comedians to make sure none of the comedians repeat the same material over and over. The music hall is an underrated gem on this ship. It's on decks 8 and 9, and I'd say it's a nice mid-sized venue that is that sweet spot of being bigger than most of the trivia venues, but smaller than the Royal Theatre. They had musical performances and some of the game shows here. I would have liked if they had more activities in this venue, because I felt some of the activities would have benefited from this somewhat larger venue. The card room on deck 11 is a small venue where you can play games or do puzzles. I love this spot that has natural light and overlooks the boardwalk. When I was on Wonder of the Seas, their card room was, I think, in a similar area, but it was completely enclosed with no view. So I really liked this one in comparison. We did the main dining room for all 8 nights on this cruise and had the same servers. They were great. I did say we would share a table, but they put us at a table by ourselves. The advantage of this is that we could get in and get out with all 3 courses in 45 minutes to an hour. Remember, there were only 2 of us and would usually peruse the menu on the app before we got to dinner. So we knew what we wanted and we'd get our orders in before the bigger tables next to us. The food quality was pretty good. It was hard to predict portion size. I usually think portions will be pretty small on cruise ships, but sometimes you get taken aback by huge portions, like this brisket. I had a lot of salmon on this cruise, and it was consistently good, and I like that I tended to get a decent amount of vegetables. Desserts tended to have the standard cruise ship texture of a bit firmer than mousse, so we opted for cake when we could. Some of our favorites were the Boston cream pie and the warm chocolate cake. To me, the warm chocolate cake was trying to mimic Carnival's chocolate melting cake, and I have to say they did an excellent job. It has a layer of fudge over the warm cake along with the ice cream, and I wish they served it every night. I really like Royal Caribbean's app. You can see the daily schedule and heart the things you want to do and get reminders. A few weeks before sailing, you can reserve the big shows like Cats, the Aqua Show, and the Ice Skating Show. Don't worry if things look booked up before sailing. They will open up more seats once you're on board, and there's always a standby line with plenty of people getting into the event. The pool deck was nice, but crowded and as hot as you'd expect on Caribbean sea days. I didn't spend much time here as I don't like direct sun. When the sun was out and people were at the pool, you'd find me in the skating venue reading or at trivia around the ship. But I did film some of the pool decks to show you. There are several pools, and while I didn't try them, I liked that they always had lifeguards at the pool. My daughter and I came back a little early on a port day, and we did do the slides when there was a very short line. My daughter also highly recommends the soft serve on the pool deck midship. She liked that they served the ice cream for you, and you didn't have to worry about little kids messing around with the soft serve machine. There were some things that did annoy me on this cruise, and some that I've already stated. The first thing is that some of the activities are in smaller venues than they should be, completely filling up by 15 to 20 minutes before the start time. Another thing is the open solarium is way too hot and needs to be climate controlled. I would have loved to spend more time here, but I just couldn't deal with the heat. And then there was a huge push by the crew to purchase a specialty dining package on the first day of the cruise. I was asked 5 different times to buy the specialty dining package by 5 different people in 5 different parts of the ship. It was crazy, but luckily after the full court press on the first day, I wasn't asked anymore. 4, there were some plumbing issues on this cruise. On day 6 of the cruise, I flushed the toilet and it wouldn't flush. About 15 minutes later, it flushed and I could wash my hands. The water was out for about 15 to 30 minutes. I walked around my deck that day and I could smell sewage. I could never smell sewage in my cabin though. On day 7, I was coming back to my cabin and there were 3 leaks coming out of the ceiling with buckets under them. Engineers were promptly working on it, and then they had dryers out to dry out the hallway carpet, but there was definitely a plumbing issue. And finally, my 5th complaint is the strange artwork that's in the stairwells. Maybe if I took the elevator, I wouldn't have such an issue, but it's kind of out there. It's mystifying, just like the cat show. And my last complaint is that they bring out popcorn for movies and shows, but they charge for it. On every other cruise line I've been on, popcorn has been free. Royal does charge only $2.50 for it, but when you've paid thousands for a cruise, I don't want to be nickel and dimed. And they are literally nickeling and diming you with the popcorn. Just give away the popcorn for free, Royal Caribbean. They also charge $3.50 for cotton candy at the Family Fun Festival, but I guess I can see charging for that more than I can the popcorn. As much as I thought there were some negatives on this cruise, there were a lot of advantages. There is so much to do that will please even the pickiest person with something they will enjoy out of all the shows and activities. There is a lot of talent on board, whether it be the dancers, the divers, the singers, the ice skaters. Central Park is an amazing place to sit and enjoy the greenery and the orchestra, especially at night. And for its age, Oasis of the Seas is a well taken care of ship. In some areas of the ship, like Central Park and the pool deck and the Royal Promenade, I would have thought the ship was only a year or two old. I had a great time on Oasis of the Seas. I paid $2,400 for the cruise fare and prepaid gratuities. That's 2 people sharing an inside room for 8 days, or $150 per person per day. This does not include cross-country airfare, the refreshment package, or excursions. Royal Caribbean tends to be more expensive than other cruise lines, and when it's going to be a cruise where you're spending more time on the ship like this one that had 3 sea days, I think it's worth it because of the variety of shows and activities. Thank you for listening, and please like and subscribe. Thanks.